Hi, my name is Isabella Dewig, and I chose to write my essay on how isolation drives a plot in the yellow wallpaper. The time era in which this short story was written was in the second half of the 19th century. I think as a reader, knowing what kinds of rights and laws were or were not in place in regards to women plays a huge role into how isolation could have been controlled. My thesis is the element isolation adds tremendous drive to the yellow wallpaper. Some evidence to support my thesis would be that the narrator's husband isolating her causes her sanity to deteriorate, adding plot to this short story. Another one would be how all of the narrator's hallucinations that she insists are real, such as a woman she sees behind the bars behind the wallpaper, and her actions such as her creeping around the room at the end of the story, drive the plot in the yellow wallpaper. And my last one would be that her change in thought about the wallpaper intrigues the reader because in the beginning she despises the wallpaper in every sense. She uses a lot of adjectives that are strong to describe the smell, the pattern, and the color that makes it super rough, I guess. The most important symbol in the yellow wallpaper would be the yellow wallpaper. The narrator states it's the worst wallpaper she has ever seen in her life, describing the odor, color, and pattern in such ways that make the reader hate it too without physically seeing it. The woman the narrator sees behind it. At night, she is shaking prison bars. Throughout the day, she is subdued, quiet. After she sees the woman behind the bars, she keeps her mind busy by trying to figure out if the wall is really moving or if she's just going insane from being isolated in the room staring at the wallpaper all day, every day. Towards the end of her stay at this house, she comes to the conclusion that the front pattern does move, and no wonder. The woman behind shakes it. At one point, she even gets out of bed in the middle of the night to try and help her escape by pulling and shaking the prison bars with her. This symbol ties in with my thesis because it shows how the narrator's husband isolating her causes her sanity to deteriorate, adding plot to this short story. Some important quotations I found throughout the yellow wallpaper would include the color is hideous enough and unreliable enough and infuriating enough, but the pattern is torturing. Like a woman stooping down and creeping about behind the pattern. This quote is before she's certain that it's a woman. She just thinks it's a faint image. She doesn't see anything in particular. The faint figure behind seemed to shake the pattern just as if she wanted to get out. She's getting a little more familiar with this woman, which she sees in the next quote. At night, in any kind of light, in twilight, candlelight, lamplight, and worst of all by moonlight, it becomes bars. That outside pattern, the woman behind it as plain as can be. She's absolutely certain at this point that it's a woman shaking bars, just as if a prisoner would be. Then, in the very bright spots, she keeps still, and in the very shady spots, she just takes hold of the bars and shakes them hard. The narrator's relationship with her husband. The narrator's husband is a physician who follows Dr. Mitchell's rest cure treatment that included prohibition of prolonged intellectual stimulation or writing. With Gilman's choice of words to provide imagery of her personal opinion to the room her husband chose for her well-being, readers find isolation to be the biggest element that drives the plot to the yellow wallpaper. He does not allow her to write, which she feels passionate about, and prohibits her from leaving the room. These two factors contribute to the narrator being driven out of sanity. John assumes that there is no reason to suffer, but he does not make an effort to understand her mental illness and take into consideration how much she really suffers from being so lonely. He claims that nothing was worse for a nervous patient than to give way to such fancies, and as she gives her opinion in the beginning of the yellow wallpaper, to make the room more desirable to be in. Because she's going to be in it all day, and she realizes that, of course. He also treats her as if she were a child, referring to her as a blessed little goose and his little girl. The room he chose for them to stay in for the time being was a nursery with the windows being secured into place as well as the bed being bolted to the floor, something you'd only have in a children's room for a child. Whether John put his wife through this isolation in hopes of curing her or for the simple fact that he's not wanting to deal with her, all these factors give in to the conclusion, Rita's draw of isolation adding so much drive to the plot in the yellow wallpaper. Had it not been for him, the narrator would not have been locked away against her will away from her own infant. In conclusion, there would utterly be no point in this short story without isolation. The yellow wallpaper is revolved around this gothic element. Gilman did a fantastic job adding details that drive the plot. There is so much going on that never leaves a reader uninterested.